these same skills, as you said, a leader also needs to have the ability to adapt. So maybe sort of say a good leader has maybe a sixth skill, and I can't come up with a word that begins with a C, but it is the ability to contextualize, right? So maybe that is our sixth C, is the ability to contextualize the other five in the particular context that you happen to be in.
Yeah.
So in that sense, right, as you're looking to contextualize this, so maybe we go back to sort of Tim Cook and the fact that he's had to work in two contexts. One, where he really had to consolidate on what Steve Jobs had left behind as a platform and grow it. And one, that suddenly the world has changed because of multiple disruptions. So how would a Tim Cook look at the five C's in terms of the sixth C of contextualizing those five C's? Where do we think?
So the contextualizing, to add to your point, I would say, apart from the 5 C's where I started, Varun, is that combination of the 5 C's which a leader brings to the organization has to make it competitive. That is the context. Because if you're not competitive in the context, then you're losing. So let's take the example of Apple right now. If they do not innovate on the form factor, on AI, they're going to lose more and more. They're already losing. So whatever you do, you might have the highest IQ, you can have the best design, you can have the best whatever it is. Combined, you need to be competitive as a unit. Whether it is a business school, whether it is a company, whether it's a product, whether it's a service.
So on the context front, which you sort of said, competitive context is being our sixth C. I'm feeling pretty good that we're coming up with six now, right? So if we took the idea of context, there is obviously an external force that drives context, which is what we're talking about, right? The environment you're playing in, the competitive context. But what about the internal context as well? Because there are certain organizations that have built a culture over time, or that work a certain way over time, and which may or may not be right for the new times, but there are some strengths in there. So I would think that a leader should also have the ability to contextualize their leadership style to sort of the internal organization and the forces that are internal in nature, not necessarily competitive in nature.
Absolutely. See, culture is very, very crucial. So if you want to add a 7th C, you can put that. Now, why is culture important? Because let's go back. Let's go back to Henry Ford, 1913. Why did Henry Ford fail? Okay. He failed not because he had a weak culture. He had a very strong culture. So cultures need to be fluid and adaptable to the new world. So quite often what happens is companies get locked into the way of doing things. So there is a thing of, we know this is the only way to do it. And hence they are blind to the outside practice things which are happening. So you need to be constantly agile to say, I have a best practice, what's the next practice? And I think that's something that every leader needs to bring. And if you do not feel the heat of the market, the heat of the consumer feeling and feedback, you'll never change your internal processes. You'll continue to do what you're doing.
No, I do agree with you, but there is a counter view that I'm not sure I agree with, but I'll put that on the table. I agree with you with the fact that the competitive context should basically act as the driver of your internal context. And if there's a mismatch, the fact is you have to work in the outside context. And that should somehow shape the internal culture and the internal context. But what do you then think about Warren Buffett's statement about culture eats strategy for
That's Peter
Drucker, yeah.
Drucker's comment, right. Yeah. So that's very true. Culture eats strategy for breakfast because at the end of the day, go back to all the body of knowledge on strategy. Almost everybody says, when you have a strategy, you're betting on people. Listen, strategy is 1% thinking, 99% execution. So my view of strategy, having done the role over the last 5 years, Varun, is in the past, strategy for us was landing a 747, big 230, 250 tonner with 4 engines, with the horizon, ATC tells you 3 kilometers runway, landed. Beautiful. Today, the world has changed. Today's strategy is about, you have an aircraft carrier, you have fighter jet, you have to land within 100 meters. So you have to do many sorties and land and take off. So strategy is very, very dynamic in today's world. Now, if strategy is very, very dynamic, then people have to be extremely agile, and that culture has to be very learning at one level and executing at another level. So both have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, it's gone. Okay. So there are many companies, who say, okay, let me import Varun from SPJ into a business school and things will change. It doesn't. Because you cannot secret sauce called culture. Mm-hmm. Varun is successful in one place because the culture enables him to succeed. Okay, culture is the bad farmer grows weeds. the good farmer grows something, okay? The best farmer grows the soil. So culture is growing the soil.